Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
But I have a great letter from Vesna, our what would you call her? Our lady in Sarajevo, definitely a foundational member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, Vesna Lukic, who has written me a letter. Hello, Robert, and all the members of our little community. I have a confession to make. I don't know if your opinion about me would change after this. I don't think it could. But I've heard that it's good to your soul to admit one's sins. So here it is. I like the Hobbit movies. And I like them more than the book itself. There. Now, that burden is off my chest. And I'm going to explain why. I know they have some issues and know that love triangle is not one of them, but it's mostly based on a visual aspect, color palette, and the damn 3D. And that was the only way I could watch all three movies in the theater because, unlike many others, those never had an option of 2D. I agree they're not even close to the Lord of the Rings movies, quality-wise. I think that everybody can agree with that, even those who really love the Hobbit movies more than Lord of the Rings. And yes, there are people like that, just like there are people who like the prequels more than the original Star Wars. Even the worst of them all, Attack of the Clones. By the way, I'm an Attack of the Clones apologist, supporter, whatever. I like Attack of the Clones quite a bit, actually. I like Attack of the Clones a lot better than I like The Force Awakens. I know, maybe a lot of you are going to unsubscribe or write me off on that one, but change my mind. Many of the problems that Hobbit movies have is based on production, primarily MGM, because they greenlit the production even before the adaptation of the book was solved, so the production got stopped for a long time, which led to losing Guillermo del Toro and one of the main actors. But all of this is very well known. Personally, I don't know if I would like this version of Thranduil, although I don't know if I would like his version of Thranduil, though I love most of his movies, but I think his Middle-earth would be too weird, even for me. And I like weird stuff. Oh, we know, Vesna. Talking about weird stuff, having sex with a fish is a little bit different than woman-elf and man-dwarf relationship. Just saying. And I think dwarf men are more attractive than dwarf women because of the beard. But I guess that's up to personal taste. But I digress. Back to the difference between the book and the movies. Most people said that's the main reason why they didn't like the movies is because it's more Thorin's story than Bilbo's, and I agree. But it's like that in the book also. It's because of the dwarves' quest that Bilbo left his home. And speaking of leaving his home, in the book, even that wasn't his decision. He was made to by Gandalf, literally pushed out the door. He was also useless in the battle with the trolls. Gandalf was the only one who procrastinated them until dawn, and the things he actually did in the book, he also did in the movies. So the critique that he was the secondary character in the movies, unlike in the books, is not valid. The thing I really didn't like in the book are dwarves. They all look the same, and I mean totally the same. Same beard, same build, same character. The only difference was the color of their hats and the instrument they played. So if, by any chance, in the battle they lose the hat or, God forbid, the instrument because they're very valuable during the fight, you would know which is which. Only Bombur looked different, and the only difference is being fat and slow. In the book, none of them was a warrior. They were musicians. Maybe that's why I never could remember their names. Just like I couldn't remember the names of the 7 dwarves, and they at least had different characters. No wonder Snow White could live with all 7 of them. That was actually like living with only one of them just when you're drunk. I find it interesting that the part that I most find silly and even made a meme of it, the eagles part, was exactly like in the book, when all of them were on that last tree, except they were attacked by wargs and goblins, not orcs. Although I must admit, I like the look of the wargs more in The Lord of the Rings than in The Hobbit. I've never heard anybody thinking that was the silly part in the book, or maybe just because it was a kid's book, which I don't agree, but we'll get back to that later. So silliness is allowed. And now here comes the best part in the movie. Thranduil, in the book, he looked more like a frog, and I have a feeling Del Toro would make him also look like that, knowing his passion for amphibious creatures. I remember in the theater after the movie, most women said, "Forget Legolas, give me his father," which I could agree with, although I wouldn't mind Legolas too, probably at the same time, knowing you, Vesna. If Snow White could be with 7, I could be with 2, or 3, or 4. Talking about Legolas, it's natural that he'd be in the movie, because at the time, he lived with his father. Now, some of his abilities were over the top, but the way he acted like an arrogant brat, unlike he was in The Lord of the Rings, is also natural. That's why his journey to become humble and a friend with a dwarf is even more important. And as I've said before, I don't mind his relationship with Tauriel, which is a totally fictional character made up for the movie. I love that you say Tauriel is a totally fictional character as opposed to every other character in the book. Because there was never a romantic relationship between the two of them. Yes, he liked her, but she likes somebody else. It's a classic story that everybody can relate to. Most popular and beautiful women often choose some, let's just say, less handsome guys, and Killy was rather handsome for a dwarf. So there never was a threesome in the Hobbit movies, although I find that thought very intriguing. I like interspecies relationships. I know you do. I would add one human in there too, just to be complete. If I would be the one who wrote the script. I wonder how people would react to that foursome. All other things have been said, like Smaug was perfect. I even like more that Bilbo was going straight for the Arkenstone and not take some golden cups first. That would make him just a greedy little bastard. The ending of the second movie was perfect. While in the book, Smaug left the mountain many times, killing cattle and villagers. In the movie, he did it only for the first time in 60 years, so one whole generation thought he was a myth. And when he flew away in the full glory, and when the music cut down, the sound cut down, and Bilbo's line, "What have we done?" which Martin Freeman said magnificently, the sky turned black, and it still gives me chills. I must say I understand why people said that it shouldn't have happened that way, because by the time we watch the third movie, a whole year has passed, so one doesn't have the same attachment to the people in Lake Town, but watching it now back to back, it looks much better. Now, I won't talk much about the third movie, because most things that people said with, I agree, meaning this was the first time we actually see Azog in the movie fighting Thorin after 2 years, but again, watching back to back, Thorin's death has an even bigger impact than the time I saw in the theater. And again, that was handled much better than in the book. There, they were all surrounded by other dwarves and elves and even people in the tent. Here, the two of them were alone, allowing those actors to give the best performance they could have. Also, the death of Killy and Philly was done much better. In the book, it was just a mention. Oh, and if it was made by Bilbo's point of view, which was also the criticism I've heard from the book purists, we won't have the third movie at all because he was hit by a rock almost immediately as soon as the battle started. So him going to warn Thorin and company was completely made by Jackson. I just regret that the scene of Thorin's funeral was cut off the theatrical release because it was beautiful. The only thing I didn't like was the overuse of CGI, and not in a good way, but I'm sure if all the production went smoothly, like they've been expected to, we would have had much better movies. We could actually see a glimpse of that scene when Gandalf got captured by Bolg. That was the real Bolg we were meant to have, and it was perfect. We should thank MGM for why they didn't. And as a conclusion, I've said I don't agree that The Hobbit is a kid's book. It has death of one of the main characters along with many others. It has war between 5 armies, and I don't think it's a kid's thing. Now in the book, those deaths were not so graphic, and the horror of war is pink-colored, but it's still horror. And not to mention burning people alive by dragonfire. Now that is a kid thing for sure. In the end, that's my only opinion, maybe because I've read The Hobbit after Lord of the Rings as a teenager, and that it's Tolkien's weakest work. Even he went back and rewrote some things after he finished the Lord of the Rings book, so until next time, we'd have some disagreements about some movies, and if your opinion about me wasn't changed that much, stay healthy, happy, and horny. Vesna. Well, Vesna, my high opinion, my very high, the highest opinion of you could never be changed. What a delightful letter. My problem with the Hobbit films, and I do think they're staggering achievements, is the tone of it. And I understand The Hobbit was a kid's book, and the thing about Lord of the Rings, it's the end of all things. If the Fellowship does not succeed, Mordor takes the world. Sauron will take the world. With Sauron at his side, but it's literally the end of the world. It's the apocalypse. If they don't win, evil will blanket the countryside, and the way of life everyone knows is gone. The Hobbit doesn't have that. It doesn't have that overarching sort of end of the world business that's happening. So I understand where you're coming from, but my problem is that the Hobbit movies are just wildly divergent in tone from one minute to the next. And I do think the high frame rate and the colors, there's not as much verisimilitude as there was in the first Lord of the Rings series. The Hobbit there's a lot of wrong physics. I know that's crazy to complain about physics, but the way people and creatures move in The Hobbit, sometimes I'm like, come on, man. especially in the first movie. That's when I found I had the biggest problem